like to introduce you to the main character in this week's halachic story. He is a salesman in a silver and gift store. Most likely not just an ordinary salesperson. It seems that often he's in the store alone, certainly so in today's story, and maybe in many ways is really serving as the manager. But one way or another, as we meet Ruvain, he is alone in the store, open for business. Gentleman comes in and he's staring, looking around the store, and fixates on a beautiful silver menorah, Hanukkah menorah. And after admiring it from the distance, he starts to ask Ruvain, our salesperson, some questions about the menorah. Is it pure silver? Is it weighted? How will the finish, stand up to age and to tarnishing? And then he asks Ruvain if he could feel it and hold it and look at it up close himself. Ruvain, of course, complies and gives it to the potential customer. And the customer is angling it, looking at it, and then he runs out the door with the silver menorah. It's a nice sized menorah. He runs out the door, very valuable menorah, and Ruvain takes off after him. And the guy with the menorah is running quite fast. And Ruvain is giving it all, and he's just about to catch up with him when the thief adds his energy boost, and he picks up a lead over Ruvain. Ruvain doesn't give up; he keeps on running after him. Just again, he's about to catch up with him, and the thief boosts himself up and runs away. This happens another couple of times, and then unexpectedly, the thief drops the menorah and runs away. Ruvain stops, he picks up the menorah. We'll assume there were some damages, but not too many damages to the menorah, and he returns to the store. On his way to the store, besides for huffing and puffing a little bit, he's actually feeling good about himself. He rescued this valuable merchandise and is able to return it to the store. However, whatever good feelings he had at the time vanished as he entered the store. And he noticed that 3 or 4 other menorahs were missing. And the Netilas Yadayim silver cups were missing. And Shabbos licht were missing. And some other non-silver expensive gifts were missing. And he realized he had been set up. While he was chasing this robber, the rest of the crew came in and emptied out a fair percentage of the stock. Well, Ruvain obviously calls up the manager. We'll assume that one of them called the police as well, but the police are not part of our story. And he called the owner. The owner is Shimon. And Shimon comes, they talk a little bit, and then Shimon says, well, you're responsible for the loss. You're a shomer socha. We have 4 different shomrim, the Dalet shomrim. The first, which many of us may have been in various times in our lives and probably to come again, is what we call the shomer chinam. A neighbor asks you, do me a favor, I'm going to be away for a couple of days. Can you watch my plant and water it? Can you watch my gold watch? I'm always so sentimentally attached to the watch, and everything else is okay, but I don't trust it to leave it in my apartment when nobody is around. Will you watch my watch? And you say, no problem. And you take care of it. You give him back to him when he comes back. And that's a shomer chinam. A shomer chinam is not getting, chinam means at no cost. He's not charging for his services. And as such, he has only one area of responsibility where he can be held financially culpable, and that is if he were negligent. So if he decided to leave the watch out on the railing on the catwalk, and somebody either walked away with it or it fell off and it smashed, got damaged, he's responsible because that was negligence. But otherwise, as long as he takes appropriate protocol, should the watch be stolen, some other how gets lost, and no negligence is involved, he's not responsible. But a shomer sacha, one who's getting paid to watch something, he is obligated on theft and loss, geneva and aveda. I guess some insurance policies took the phrases right from the from the Torah and the Mishnah. On geneva and aveda, theft and loss, one who receives a salary is culpable. If either of those situations take place, he is exonerated if it is in the category of anus, if he's an anus, an unavoidable type of situation. So if you have three guys holding pistols that are robbing him, what's he going to do? So even though that's a robbery, but it's not something that he could prevent. So he would not be responsible. It would be anus. So Shimon, the owner of the store, says to Reuven, since you are technically a shomer sachar, you're receiving salary, then you're responsible for the theft. Now, one could, by reason, think that Reuven had at least two other choices. He could have not run out of the store, just held his ground. He could have run out of his store, locked the door, and then chase after the thief, but he did neither of those two. Nevertheless, Reuven claims to his boss that he is anus. These were extenuating circumstances of something that happened, and in the intensity and the shock of the moment, that he decides to run over and to try to retrieve the owner's property for him. He just ran out and left, not thinking of any possible negative consequences that could take place. So they had a civil discussion, but they didn't agree, and they went to Rabbi Silberstein to paskin. So we have two questions that are going to be dealt with in the answer. Number one is whether or not the situation that Reuven found himself in could be classified as an onus, these extenuating circumstances, or is it in the category of a theft? And the answer to that would either obligate or exonerate Reuven from payment. There's a second question, in that there is a machlokes, a difference of opinion, is that even when we have a case that we consider to be extenuating, unavoidable circumstances, this onus, and the person is an anus, the circumstance in Hebrew is called an onus, is that there is a machlokes, a difference of opinion, as to whether or not that condition that would relieve the shomer, the watchman, the person responsible, relieve him of any financial responsibility, whether or not it requires that he be on the scene. But if he were off the premises when this unusual circumstance there are those who hold that he's not exonerated because he should have been with the item that he was watching. And the items are not the menorah that was almost stolen, but the items are the other ones that were left behind in the store and went missing. So Rabbi Silberstein reminds us of, while it's a brief case in the Torah, in Pashas Mishpatim, in Sefer Shmos, of an intruder into one's house, im b'machteret. If a homeowner discovers somebody who tunneled into his house, broke into his house, he is allowed to shoot and ask questions afterwards. Why? because there's a logic that not all civil authorities agree with. Therefore, you might not want to take my advice, especially if you're not living in Florida, uh, because there are states that have different laws. But according to the Torah law, if somebody breaks into your house at night, we assume that homeowners, home residents, are home at night. That's the assumption. And the intended robber, thief, he knows that. So he's going to try to come in at 2 a.m. when people are asleep and steal whatever he wants to steal. And he's assuming that he's going to be able to do it quietly and get away without arousing the home resident. But he's aware of the fact that whatever noise he does make, or maybe not even related to him, he might encounter the residents of the house. And he understands that if he does encounter that resident, they're not going to say, oh, please take what you want, help yourself, no problem. Most people aren't going to say that. So he's going to be prepared for the resident to attack him. And the robber, the would-be thief, he's prepared to defend himself. So in other words, that intruder at night is presumed, unless we have evidence to the contrary, we presume he is prepared to bodily injure, maybe even kill the residents of the home if he is discovered. And as such, the Gemara explains that the Torah's logic is habala hargecha hashkem v'hargo, that one who is intending to kill you get up, take action, and kill him first so that you survive. He has no right to take your life. And in the Torah, we probably would advise even ourselves when we're not in the heat of such a case, and we would advise others, forget it, let him take it. You're gonna get into a fight with this guy? Who knows? People are crazy, drug addicts, they're going to shoot you. Just let him take whatever he's gonna take, and whatever you can get from insurance, you'll get. What you don't get, you write off, and just stay safe. And that would be the prudent and logical thing to do for most people. But the Gemara knows, the Torah knows, that human nature is Adam Bahu Al Mamono, that a person is extremely concerned about his property. And there's a similar concept in the same Gemara, in the same Masechta of Shabbos, and Rashi quotes the second source, saying, Ein Adam ma'amid atzmo v'ro'eh shenotlim mamono b'fanav v'shotek. A person doesn't just hold himself back while he sees somebody taking his property away. So that's why the Torah allows the homeowner to shoot first, unless it's clear that the person was, if it happens to be a good neighbor of yours, and maybe he came in, looking for something that he needed or whatever it is, but he's not going to harm you, then you're not allowed to shoot him. Rabbi Silverstein says is that the principle in this halacha also elucidates the question at hand. When Reuven, the salesperson, was shocked by somebody who had the audacity to run off with the menorah, he wasn't really in the full logical, state of mind. It's more like, a fight or flight type of mechanism that he went into. His immediate response was, Ein Adam Omeid. A person doesn't stand by while his property is taking place. Reuven was a responsible guy. He didn't own it per se, but he was responsible for it. He did care about his boss's property, and he just instinctively got up and pursued the thief. And Rabbi Silverstein, some of us have studied some other shadas and tshuvas in which the same principle is there, is that when you have this normal reaction that causes a certain consequence, and it's under extenuating circumstances and shocking circumstances where there's a certain innate tendency to make a decision, to take an action almost without really even thinking it through, that usually the person is not held responsible for damages that may result. And as to the case of whether or not Reuven, the shomer, had to be on premises to be exonerated, which obviously if he were, the whole story wouldn't have come up. But basically, in addition to whatever principles the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, specifies, we have a teaching, and we've used it a couple of times in other circumstances, is that whatever customs prevail in the local community, that sets the law in many cases. So if it's understood when a person entrusts somebody to be a shomer, a guardian for his property, and he pays him and he makes him in to the shomer sachar, that if it would be understood that there might be times where the shomer cannot be on the same premises as the objects that he's watching, which, you know, that could be, someone could ask me to watch something for him, but he knows that I go to work and I'm not going to be home 24 hours a day, but I will hide it in my apartment. If I have a safe, I'll put it in my safe. I'll do what is customary to keep things secure, but I'm not going to be on the property all the time. And when that's understood, then that becomes part of the halacha. And that Rav Silverstein felt that a store owner knows that too. Most likely, if the store owner himself was present, he would have done the very same thing that Reuven, his salesperson, did. He would have pursued the guy, even though there weren't people in the store. Now, maybe as a lesson, maybe they do some training and they tell people, you know, the first thing you do, call 911. The second thing you do is lock the door if you decide to pursue him. Again, it may not be really be the most smart thing to pursue somebody, especially in this day and age. But the psak is, in this particular case, that Reuven is not responsible to replace the merchandise that was stolen. A quick connection to the time that we stand in on the calendar, being already past midpoint of the Chodesh Elul, the month that precedes Rosh Hashanah, is that sometimes with all good intentions, we as people, not anybody signed on necessarily, but just people in general, with all good intentions that we might have, sometimes we mess up, you know, halachically, religiously. We think we're doing something good, but maybe it didn't really work out the way we thought, and we may have caused damage to somebody, may need to apologize to somebody, maybe just cause damage to ourselves, not necessarily physical, monetary damage, maybe spiritual damage, even though we had good intentions, and we need to repair that. Of course, that would be probably the best case scenario. The worst case scenarios are that we didn't have the best intentions. We knew we didn't have the best intentions. So we have to work on that too. So let this story just remind all of us to take advantage of Chodesh Elul, the month of Elul, to help us make our preparations for the Yom Hadin for Rosh Hashanah. A Shavua Tov to you, and a K'tiva v'Chatima Tova to all for a great year ahead.